In South Korea, all able-bodied male citizens have to enlist in the military for 18 months before turning 28 years old. This of course includes K-pop singers. The 7 members of BTS at the peak of their careers enlisted in the military, serving from December of 2022 to June of 2025.
You really do have to go back to Elvis Presley to think of a pop music act of this magnitude entering the military at the absolute peak of their popularity.
First, J-Hope and RM, the 3rd and 4th oldest members, released solo albums. Soon after, Jin, the oldest member, enlisted. Meanwhile, J-Hope, Suga, and Jimin released solo projects. Later, the 2nd and 3rd oldest members enlisted. Meanwhile, the younger members released solo projects. Then the younger members enlisted all together. For 6 months, all of the BTS members were in the military, but they released pre-recorded albums and music videos, so it was like they never left. After these 6 months, Jin, the oldest member, was discharged, and he released a solo project. Then J-Hope was discharged, and both members released more solo projects. Soon after, the younger members were all discharged from active duty, and Suga finished his social service, which lasts 21 months instead of 18 because of a shoulder injury. And in no time, the 7 BTS members reunited and started working on their group comeback in June of 2025. Despite not being 7, during these 2.5 years, BTS had new music out at all times. They were unable to release music as a group, but they were solo artists under the same BTS label, and they even promoted themselves as members of BTS. All of this while their bandmates served in the military. This strategy is surprisingly rare in K-pop. The members of male K-pop groups don't tend to enlist together. Instead, they each wait for the moment they turn 28 to enlist, leaving their groups incomplete for many years. This is basically the main reason why so many people applaud BTS. They did not just enlist together, but they also scheduled solo releases right after the other, and they even prepared a lot of music for the 6 months while they were all serving. This strategy maintained the fandom entertained, and it even made the members more popular than they already were while promoting as BTS. That should be the end of it, but it's not. After BTS reunited in June of 2025, many started complimenting them on their effective strategy, their strong bond, and the sacrifices they made to stay as a group. But some K-pop fans believe they should not get this recognition because they were not the first group to enlist together. Therefore, they didn't do anything extraordinary. This really caught my attention because as someone who has been following BTS for a long time, I was surprised to learn that there were actually other K-pop groups that enlisted in the way BTS did. I thought, who are they? Because they are definitely not the biggest groups in K-pop. To the contrary, BTS's strategy was so unbelievable that even hopeful BTS fans were trying to calculate other scenarios in which BTS could go to the military. If they enlisted one by one, they would be reunited in 7 years, meaning 2029. This was the biggest fear. So like many other successful K-pop groups, some fans hoped that 3 or 4 members could keep the group alive with subunits. Others were hopeful to see BTS release music with 1, 2, or 3 members missing at times. Others hope for the members' closing age to enlist together, so they have a 5-year hiatus instead of a 7-year hiatus. My point is that before 2022, no one was thinking about BTS's actual strategy being a possibility. It was that rare. So why are so many people claiming that BTS's strategy was not extraordinary? To get my answer, I looked into the groups that did it first, and after doing so, I realized that BTS's strategy was even more unbelievable than I thought it was. Whenever BTS fans mention that BTS's strategy was extraordinary and very effective, some K-pop fans go on and on about how this was not an unbelievable plan. So I looked into the other groups people claim did it first, and it turns out that they are correct. Other groups enlisted in similar ways to BTS before BTS. However, I realized that for BTS, this was a difficult decision and a very complex strategy to plan. Meanwhile, the few groups that enlisted in a similar way didn't have to plan or decide much. Let's look at some examples. On and Off is a K-pop boy group under WM Entertainment, a relatively medium label. They were a 7-member group, but one of them left, so they are 6 now. From these 6 members, 1 is Japanese, so he doesn't need to enlist. That leaves 5 members. In November of 2021, the group's leader announced that the 5 Korean members will enlist together. A month later, 1 member enlisted on December 21st, 2 other members enlisted on the 27th, and the 2 last members enlisted on the 28th. The enlisted members even performed together in a military event. This plan was great. Their hiatus was very short, and they reunited after 2 years. So this strategy was very smart. But also, it was pretty much their only choice. The Korean members are so close in age that even if they enlisted when they each turned 28, their hiatus would have been the same as BTS's, very short. The one who made the biggest sacrifice was the youngest member who enlisted 2 years before his deadline. But the other members were pretty much in the typical enlistment age range for K-pop stars. Either the youngest member enlists early with the others, or he would be the only one left out. So the members definitely had to talk about it and choose to prioritize the group. But this outcome was not unbelievable. All the Korean members were born within the same year and a half. Meanwhile, the BTS members have an age difference of 5 years. A similar example to on and off that K-pop stans mention a lot is Shinhwa. By 2007, each of the 6 members of Shinhwa created their own labels to promote a solo artist, which they did until they started enlisting one by one. The difference with BTS is that during this military period, there was no music, group, or solo. However, I have to highlight that this was probably the best decision for them because they are very close in age. BTS, like many other K-pop groups with many members, are not. That's why this strategy was surprising to see in BTS, but not in this group. It was actually expected. Like on and off, there was no big sacrifice. They simply followed the law. Highlight, formerly known as Beast, are also very close in age, so they enlisted when it was time for them to enlist. While serving, 1 member left the group, so after a 2.5-year hiatus, they had a comeback as a 4-member group. Once again, this strategy was not a decision, it was just the law. Another similar example to the previous groups is 2PM. The 5 Korean members of the 6-member group enlisted when it was time for each of them to enlist. Because of their proximity in age, they finished their military service in a span of 3 years. Despite their short hiatus, they didn't prioritize the group. Instead, they had 1 comeback and then they focused on their solo careers. Another group people say enlisted together is SHINee. By December of 2018, SHINee had 4 members and 3 of them enlisted together because they were very close in age. The oldest member was actually about to turn 29 when he enlisted, but he still made sure to enlist by 28. The other 2 members enlisted just in time, only some months before their 28th birthday. In other words, they enlisted together because it was time for them to enlist. Meanwhile, the youngest member released solo music and became a member of another group. So after the older members were discharged, they reunited quickly, and soon after, the youngest member enlisted. This left the group incomplete for almost 5 years. Although this turned out great for them, I think we cannot include this group in this list. This strategy was not intentionally followed for the longevity of the group. Each member enlisted when they had to enlist, and the group was incomplete for many years. Another group some people like to mention enlisted together is TVXQ. And while that is true, there is only 2 members in this group. 1 member enlisted in July of 2015 and the other enlisted in November of 2015. Some months after their discharge, they released their comeback album. So as a group part of a big 3 label, they did benefit from enlisting together, but the plan was not as complex as BTS's. Sky, formerly known as Into It, is a K-pop male group formed under MMO Entertainment, a small/medium label now known as Wake One. They debuted as an 8-member group in 2017. A member left in 2018, another member left in 2019, and in 2020, the remaining 6 members announced they would continue the group independently. But because of the COVID pandemic, the Korean members decided to instead enlist together in November and December of 2020. This was the most surprising example I could find, because like BTS, the members are not that close in age. The youngest member was enlisting almost 3 years before his deadline. So why are we not hearing more about this? When people talk about how amazing BTS strategy is, the conversation is mostly about how beneficial this is for the longevity of the group. This strategy allows the public to 1. Not forget about them because there's constant new music, and 2. Make the group reunion happen as soon as possible. However, Sky became an independent group and then enlisted altogether. They were discharged in 2022, and since then, they haven't released any music as a group. They only held a couple of fan meetings without their Malaysian member. By the time I'm making this video, it's been 3 years since they were discharged. Just so you have an idea, after this group was discharged, BTS enlisted, released solo music, were discharged, reunited, and worked on their comeback album. During this time, this group only released vlogs and short videos. What I'm guessing is that because they don't have a label, they cannot enjoy the benefits of enlisting at the same time. Back in 2020, when they announced their enlistment, some fans were scared of this strategy because without a label and with how fast the K-pop industry goes, a complete absence may work against them. So they did go and return together, but the outcome did not happen. Their fans are still waiting for an actual comeback. The reason why I analyzed these groups' enlistments is because I wanted to understand the reason why this strategy was so shocking when BTS did it and not them. The simplest answer, of course, is that BTS is the biggest group. So when they do it, it becomes news. But I believe that answer erases BTS's efforts. Like I already explained, these groups enlisted together because they had no other choice. They are so close in age that whether they decided to prioritize the group or disband and go solo, they would have still enlisted almost all together. But this lucky situation is not common in K-pop. The 7 examples I gave may seem like a lot, but they are actually nothing. The other hundreds of K-pop groups disband before enlistment or enlist at different times. Actually, the examples I showed were so rare that it was hard for me to find them because a lot of the examples K-pop fans gave turned out to be false. I saw people mentioning EXO, but they were incomplete for 6 years because of their military service. Others mentioned Super Junior, but they were incomplete for 9 years. Mentioning them as examples of groups that follow this military strategy before BTS is just disingenuous or completely misunderstanding BTS's plan. After my research, I can say that the only group that intentionally went out of their way to follow a similar strategy to BTS before BTS was Sky, a group that similarly doesn't have the resources to have a comeback and enjoy the benefits of this enlistment strategy. When I come across these conversations, I personally feel a sentiment of rejection to BTS's efforts by K-pop fans. According to them, BTS fans are insufferable for giving them so much credit. Some even say that BTS fans have K-pop history ignorance. But what about the media's reaction and the strategy's impact in the K-pop industry? If so many groups did it first, why was it not revolutionary back then? Like I mentioned, it was not revolutionary because this plan was some groups' only choice, and the ones who actually chose this strategy didn't receive the same benefits. So how can you really say that others successfully did it first? Some people like mentioning that other groups didn't have the resources and dedicated fanbase to release solo music in a schedule similar to BTS's, and that is completely true. But why is BTS's sacrifice being erased in this entire conversation? No other group had to go through what BTS went through to make this plan a reality, yet they still chose it. In 2021, BTS was at the peak of their careers. They established themselves as not just the biggest group in the world, but also as one of the biggest artists at the moment. But this was not supposed to happen. Jin, the oldest member of BTS, was turning 28 in December of 2020, meaning that he had to enlist in the military. His birthday was on a Friday. So on Tuesday of that same week, South Korea's parliament rushed to announce a revision of the country's Military Service Act. This lets K-pop stars postpone their military service until they turn 30, but only if they have received an Order of Cultural Merit, a medal awarded by the president. BTS has been the only K-pop group ever to receive this medal, making the public name this revision the BTS Law. since it was basically created just for them. They are literally the only ones who meet the criteria. So as BTS continued releasing music and having massive success all throughout 2021, South Korea's lawmakers started debating about a possible military exemption for recording artists who have extraordinary impact globally. But something to note here is that the debate was really about BTS only. BTS broke massive barriers for K-pop artists to participate in the Western music industry since 2017, but the most popular K-pop idols were enlisting in the military all these years and no one was debating a K-pop exemption. Government officials only started considering a K-pop exemption because the 2 extra years they gave BTS were not enough. Jin was soon turning 30 and BTS's popularity didn't die down. Instead, it increased astronomically. So the meetings for a possible exemption for extraordinary artists like BTS started, and they were an absolute mess. BTS and their label decided to not get involved at all. Remember that the public was really divided about this topic, and many considered this preferential treatment. So the ones debating BTS's future and advocating in favor of military exemptions for K-pop artists were actually government officials and other K-pop labels. Busan's mayor, the Culture, Sports and Tourism Minister, the representative of the People Power Party, and other government officials wanted BTS to serve through an alternative program similar to athletes and classical musicians. But the criteria for this would have most likely been the same as for the 2-year postponement. And that was a big part of the debate. It was beneficial for K-pop labels to support BTS's exemption because their K-pop groups may also get an exemption. The problem was that BTS's achievements were too extraordinary, and no K-pop group could even meet the criteria for the 2-year postponement. 26 K-pop labels, including the big 3 agencies SM, JYP, and YG Entertainment, filed an objection to the Ministry of National Defense represented by the Korean Music Content Association. They said the amendment was unrealistic and unfair, saying it is near impossible for K-pop musicians to qualify before the age of 28. And that is true. BTS were actually too young to receive the Order of Cultural Merit in 2018, but the president gave them the medal as an exception because their achievements were truly extraordinary, never seen before in history. The K-pop labels said they were not blindly asking to lower the standards, but instead for the ministry to come up with standards that are not this extraordinary. In other words, K-pop labels were not asking to lower the standard, they were just asking to lower the standard. So picture this, K-pop labels advocated for military exemptions for BTS and other non-extraordinary musicians. Some lawmakers were advocating for only BTS to receive exemptions because their cities and government projects benefit from BTS only. Other lawmakers were against BTS and any K-pop artists receiving military exemptions. The public was divided, BTS was quiet, and BTS's label only asked lawmakers to reach a decision. But look at all of this mess. Even the ones agreeing to give BTS an exemption debated about the alternative service. Would it be a full exemption or a partial exemption? Should they perform and serve in the military at the same time, or should they serve in the military for a shorter period of time? There were many meetings, but instead of coming out with decisions, they announced delayed after delayed. So in the end, all the BTS members decided to terminate their 2-year postponement and enlist in the military. After this decision, the government stopped debating about a possible military exemption for K-pop artists because it was about BTS this entire time. What I'm trying to say is that while all of these K-pop labels begged for a 2-year postponement for the members of their groups, BTS, the only ones with an actual chance to receive exemptions, quit all of that. They said, thank you for the 2-year extension, but we are enlisting together either way. The younger members could have actually waited for the older members to enlist, have a full group comeback and a tour, and then go to the military when it was their time to go, prioritizing their personal lives and even solo careers. But they didn't. They enlisted together and up to 4 years earlier because they thought about the longevity of the group. It was not just luck or the privilege of pre-recording and releasing multiple solo projects during these 3 years. They chose their own future together when their own government and the K-pop industry were trying to play with it. That sacrifice is the essence of the BTS strategy.